I've been driving for Horizon rides for a few years now, mostly late nights. Fewer cars, fewer headaches, better tips. You get the occasional weirdo, but for the most part, people just want a quiet ride home. But every once in a while, you get a passenger you wish you hadn't picked up. It was a little after 2 a.m. when the request came through. Pick up from a gas station on the outskirts of town. A weird spot for someone to be waiting, but not unheard of. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe they were just passing through. I pulled up under the dim station lights and scanned the lot. The place was deserted. No cars. No movement. Just the flickering neon, open 24 hours, sign in the window. Then I saw him. He was standing off to the side, just outside the glow of the lights. Tall, too thin, hoodie pulled up over his head. He wasn't looking at his phone like most riders, just standing completely still, watching. My gut twisted. Something felt off. I hesitated, hovering my finger over the cancel button. But before I could press it, he stepped forward and got in the back seat. No hesitation, no greeting, just slid in and shut the door. I forced a casual tone. "Hey, how's your night going?" Silence. He didn't respond, just sat there, his head slightly tilted, like he was listening for something. I glanced at the mirror. He was staring straight ahead, hands folded neatly in his lap. My stomach churned. Most people at least mutter a hey or nod, but not him. I double-checked the address and started driving. A few minutes in, the silence was unbearable. I reached for the radio, hoping some background noise might break the tension. The moment the music started, he spoke. "Turn it off." His voice was dry, like he hadn't used it in a while. I swallowed hard and switched it off. I wanted to get this ride over with as fast as possible. We drove in silence for a while. The road was dark and empty, just endless miles of black pavement stretching ahead. Then, without warning, he leaned forward. I tensed as I felt him just inches behind me. "Do you ever think about who gets in your car?" My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean?" He smiled. I could see it in the mirror. "How much trust you put in a stranger sitting right behind you." A chill ran through me. I kept my eyes locked on the road, hands gripping the wheel. My heart was pounding now. He sat back again, but I could feel his eyes on me. Then he started talking, rambling, almost to himself, about how he used to be a driver too, about how people stole from him, how he had to teach them a lesson. The way he spoke, calm, detached, almost amused, made my skin crawl. Then his tone changed. He started muttering apologies. I didn't mean to. Over and over, voice trembling. I stole a glance in the mirror. His hands were clenched into fists. He was rocking slightly, like he was trying to keep himself together. I didn't say anything, didn't breathe too loud. We were almost there, less than 2 miles. Then he suddenly snapped out of it and shouted, "You missed the turn." I hadn't missed the turn. The GPS was still leading the way, but my body reacted on instinct. I hit the brakes hard. "Pull over." His voice was sharp now, almost angry. I hesitated. Then, in the distance, headlights. A car was coming up behind us. A police car. Relief flooded through me. I didn't care why they were out here. I just knew I wasn't alone. The guy in my back seat slid down, lying across the seat to stay out of sight. I barely breathed. The cop car crept past us, its spotlight sweeping over the road. Then, just as slowly, it disappeared into the night. The guy sat back up, smiled at me in the mirror. "You got lucky." And just like that, he opened the door and walked into the woods. I didn't wait. I slammed on the gas, my hands still shaking, my pulse in my throat. I ended my shift early that night. 2 days later, I saw his face on the news. A murder suspect, wanted for multiple homicides, and I had given him a ride. I don't drive nights anymore. I moved into the house for peace and quiet. That was the whole point. I had spent too many years in the city, too much noise, too many people, too many bad memories. After everything that happened, I needed space, somewhere I could breathe. So, when I found the little house nestled deep in the woods, it felt perfect. Secluded, remote, safe. For the first few weeks, it was everything I wanted. Mornings were filled with birdsong, evenings with the soft crackle of my fireplace. I worked from home, had no real reason to leave, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Then, one night, someone knocked on my door. It was nearly midnight. I had been reading, half asleep on the couch when the sound jolted me awake. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The house was miles from the nearest town. I had no neighbors, no visitors. No one should be here. I sat up, my pulse spiking. The knock came again. I grabbed the fireplace poker and crept to the door, peeking through the side window. A woman stood on my porch. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, her long gray hair hanging damp over her shoulders. She was clutching something, a basket, and staring straight ahead. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed, "Don't open it." But something about her expression stopped me. She didn't look dangerous, just tired. Cautiously, I cracked the door. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer at first, just studied me. Then, in a voice that was too calm, she said, "You shouldn't be here alone." A chill ran through me. I forced a weak smile. I like being alone. She ignored that, holding out the basket. Inside were jars of preserves, jam, maybe, or honey. "Welcome to the woods," she said flatly. I took the basket, muttering a thank you. She didn't leave. She just stood there, watching. Finally, she spoke again. "Keep your doors locked, your windows shut, and if you hear knocking at night, don't answer." Her eyes bore into mine, like she was testing me. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, her silhouette fading into the trees. I didn't hear a car, didn't see any lights, just the wind rustling the leaves. I shut the door and locked it. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was just an odd encounter. Maybe she was a local with good intentions. Maybe she just had a weird way of expressing concern. But then the knocking started again. It was 2 nights later. A storm had rolled in, thick clouds swallowing the moon. Rain lashed against the windows, the wind howling through the trees. And then, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I shot upright in bed, heart hammering. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The wind, the rain. It could have been anything. Then, knock, knock, knock. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the window. At first, I saw nothing. Then, in the faint glow of my porch light, I spotted her. The same woman, standing in the exact same spot. Her hair hung limp from the rain, her clothes soaked through, but she didn't seem to care. She wasn't holding the basket this time, just standing there, waiting. I backed away from the window, every instinct screaming, "Do not open the door." I remembered what she said. If you hear knocking at night, don't answer. So, I didn't. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, listening to the rain pound against the roof. Then, the doorknob rattled. I nearly dropped the flashlight. I clamped a hand over my mouth, backing further into the house. The knob twisted once, twice, testing the lock. Then, silence. I stood there for what felt like hours before I finally worked up the nerve to check again. She was gone. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I went outside, half expecting to find footprints. But there was nothing. No disturbed dirt. No sign that anyone had been there. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the storm had covered her tracks. Maybe my mind was making things worse than they really were. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And I was about to find out just how wrong. That night, I heard something new. Not knocking, scraping, like nails dragging along the wooden walls of my house. My stomach clenched. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 3:12 a.m. I slowly, carefully moved toward the window. Outside, under the dim porch light, the woman wasn't there. But someone else was. A man, tall, bald, standing just at the tree line, watching, his head tilted slightly, like he was listening. I took a step back. My mind was screaming. Who the hell was that? Where was the woman? Then, he grinned and raised one finger to his lips. I ran. I locked myself in the bathroom, phone clenched in my shaking hands as I dialed 911. The operator kept me on the line while the police were dispatched. I sat there in the dark, knees drawn to my chest, waiting to hear something. But there was only silence. When the officers finally arrived, they found nothing. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. And when I begged them to check the woman's house, the one she supposedly lived in down the road, they told me something that made my blood run cold. That house has been abandoned for years. I moved out the next morning. I don't know who the woman was. I don't know who the man in the woods was. But I do know one thing. If someone knocks at your door in the middle of the night, don't answer. I love driving at night. There's something peaceful about it. The empty roads, the hum of the engine, the world stripped down to just me and the glow of my headlights. Every Christmas Eve, I drive from my parents' house to my girlfriend Emily's place. It's a long drive, mostly back roads, but we both love the quiet, uninterrupted time together. It's our little tradition. But last Christmas Eve, I made a wrong turn, and I wish to God I hadn't. It started about an hour into the drive. Emily had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window. The snow was falling lightly, dusting the empty road ahead. We had been playing music, but I lowered it so she could sleep. That's when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. I sighed and ignored it. Probably a telemarketer or some spam call. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. I let it go to voicemail. Emily stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake up. Then it rang a third time. I sighed, muttered a curse, and answered. Hello? Silence. Then a faint, crackling static. I turned the volume up, frowning. Who is this? A voice whispered through the line. You shouldn't have taken this road. My blood went cold. I glanced at the GPS, heart pounding. We were still on track. Same route I always took. I forced a laugh. Nice try. Who is this? Silence. Then, in that same hushed voice, you missed the turn. I hung up. A shiver ran down my spine, but I tried to shake it off. Some prank caller. Just a coincidence. But then, the GPS rerouted. The screen flickered. The familiar route disappeared, replaced by a new road I didn't recognize. A road that wasn't there before. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter. The street ahead was different, narrow, lined with tall, dark trees. I didn't remember this stretch of road. I should have turned around. I should have woken Emily up, but something about the road pulled me forward. Then my headlights flickered, just for a second, and when they came back on, there was a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes, my body jerking forward. Emily shot awake. What the hell? My breath came in ragged gasps. The figure didn't move. A man, tall, motionless, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was completely hidden in shadow. Do you see that? I whispered. Emily squinted through the windshield. Her voice trembled. See what? My stomach dropped. I could still see him, standing right there. But she couldn't. She looked at me, concern creasing her forehead. Babe, there's nothing there. I couldn't breathe. The man tilted his head, slowly, deliberately. Then he took a step forward, and suddenly, my phone rang again. The screen lit up. Unknown caller. With shaking hands, I answered. The same static, the same whispering voice. Don't let him in. I punched the gas. The tires screeched against the icy pavement as we sped forward, straight through where the man had been standing, but he was gone. The road stretched on, dark and endless. Emily was panicked now. What the hell is going on? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just kept driving. The road was wrong. It was too long. We should have reached the next town by now, but there was nothing. Just trees. Endless, suffocating darkness. Then the static returned. Not from my phone. From the radio. It turned on by itself, the screen flashing, the volume rising. A voice crackled through the speakers. Not the whispering one this time. A different one. And it was Emily's voice. You missed the turn. I slammed the brakes again, my heart nearly exploding out of my chest. Emily grabbed my arm. Why did you stop? I turned to her, my hands shaking. Did you hear that? Her face was pale. Hear what? I pointed to the radio. The static was gone now. Just dead silence. Then, from somewhere in the trees, a soft knock. My stomach clenched. The knock came again. It was coming from Emily's window. She turned slowly to look and screamed. I didn't look. I didn't want to see. I threw the car into reverse, tires skidding as I whipped the car around. We flew back down the road, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Then, just like that, the trees disappeared. The familiar road was back. The gas station lights flickered ahead, and the GPS, now working, showed we were back on our original route. I pulled into the gas station lot, hands still trembling. Emily was crying, clutching her seatbelt. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No unknown numbers. No record of anything that had just happened. We sat there for a long time, too scared to move. I don't know what road we ended up on. I don't know who or what called me. But I do know one thing. We weren't supposed to be there.